Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1. Test. 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 Okay, evening everybody. I hope you're all well. Nice to see some of the usual suspects online tonight. The thing with Podbean is what I'd really like to be able to do is to, and allegedly it makes this available, although I've yet to see it happen in practice. Allegedly one can live stream, and I have actually seen other people doing it. I'm getting in a muddle somewhere. I just need to figure out what that is. And the idea behind that is that I can then live stream my live classes. Anyway, evening Caroline. Back here on YouTube, today is The Power of Now. Evening Sue. And in The Power of Now, it's a book by a guy called Eckhart Tolle, which for me was, when I read it, it was incredibly insightful. And so what I thought it would be useful to cover it, to go through. It's a bit like Marmite. I like a lot of people who read The Power of Now and find it incredibly useful. We then go on to tell everybody, and at least 50% of them look at us as if we're strange. Yes, so they go out and buy this book, or you lend them a copy or whatever, and they, no thanks. So pretty much 50% of people like it, 50% of people don't. I don't know the percentage of people whose lives are changed by it, but I'm not sure that I'm actually coming through. Yes, I must be. I've got a dreadful lag on this machine, so can you hear me? I'm just going to do there is get rid of Podbean because nobody's managed to find their way into it. Yep, brilliant. So the things that I learned from The Power of Now, really, there's only three things that I learned. One was, I can turn this off. There we go. One was that I'm not my thoughts. Another, that I'm not my emotions. And the final and obvious one, it's only obvious when you think about it, is that the present moment's all there really is. The past is often contentious. We have experiences and other people have experiences. We don't always necessarily see eye to eye about what they were, which is not an unusual thing. And the future, of course, is pure imagination. I mean, there weren't many people that predicted a coronavirus for 2020 or anything similar. Very, very few. So the future is largely unknown. Doesn't mean that we kind of stick our head in the sand, but it's very important to realize where your life happens. It happens now, So these three things, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, and the present moment is all there is, were pivotal, and they changed my perspective on everything. And in the book as well, there was a meditation called the inner body meditation, which I misinterpreted. I believe that now, looking back at it, that I misunderstood what it meant. And I created a meditation which was a largely an imaginative experience, and it aligns with some of the things that I've been teaching in the mindfulness-based resilience course group at the moment. It's quite deep, so it's not something I'd tend to do in public, just to a public group, because it would leave so many people behind. And those were the things that I took away from the Power of Now. Now, the other thing that comes away with it is this. First, I need to explain how Eckhart Tolle got to the point where he was able to write this book, and how he learned that the present moment's all there is, and he's not his thoughts and not his emotions. So apparently he went through an experience which is often referred to as the dark night of the soul. This is usually quite difficult experience. Well, it's always a difficult experience because one doubts the nature of reality and existence of the self and so on, and all of this is called into question by the way that the mind works. And so this can happen over a day or two. We could perceive it, for example, to be a depressive or a psychotic episode at some levels. Not everyone makes it through. And then it's actually the origin of the name is from a Christian saint, St. John of the Cross, who coined the phrase to refer to the doubt in the nature of the self and God and anything. So one of the things that can happen, the upside potential from a dark night of the soul, is a thing called deconstruction of the ego. It's more like a collapse of the ego. And what the ego is it's who I believe I am. And in the modern world, that generally consists of a bunch of labels. You know, I'm a mindfulness teacher, I'm this age, I live in this place, I'm in this socio-economic group, I have these political alignments, those philosophies, and there's all of these labels. I'm a good person, I'm a cheat, I'm a whatever it is. I am. And it's quite important for people to navigate through their reality, to have a set of beliefs about who they are, and they can just go, bing, gone. And the end result of that, there are only two people that I know of who've experienced this. One is Eckhart Tolle, and the other is Ramana Maharshi, who was a non-duality teacher. Effectively, what Eckhart Tolle teaches is non-duality. Non-duality is a Hindu philosophical perspective where there's no separation between the self and the rest of reality. It's all one. And that hence the not two, non-dual. And so both of these people had this experience and their sense of ego collapsed. And one of the consequences of this sort of release of a belief that's holding you back, because essentially if you believe you're a bunch of labels, you're kind of tied to whatever that means. And that can be horrendously uncomfortable for many people. And so letting go of all of that is elevating. And the end consequence of it can be bliss. So Eckhart Tolle wandered around living on park benches and staying at friends for 2 years while he recovered from this. But basically the recovery was, all I wanted to do was go and sit on a bench and watch the wind in the trees. I don't actually see a problem with that, but in our culture they're likely to section you for that. So what actually happened then is he started teaching this, and that came to be quite popular, and he went to Vancouver and then got discovered by Oprah Winfrey, who promoted his book, and everything else is history. Many millions of copies have been sold. Now, there's a couple of downsides to the Power of Now if one just tends to take it at its absolute. One is that because Eckhart just kind of woke up one day without an ego, and the book is largely about how unhelpful the ego is. Oh, you actually managed to get into Podbean, did you? I've actually closed the session. Yeah, so Eckhart hadn't actually had the experience of being somebody who has this ego structure and then needs to work with it, because it was just magically disappeared in almost no time at all, a day or two. Whereas for many of us, working through the baggage that we have about ourselves can take years. So he doesn't have that experience, and there isn't really a roadmap. There's a this all sounds wonderful, but what now? Element to it. And what that does, because he points out how unhelpful the ego is and how useful presence is, and presence is mindfulness. It is useful to be here right now, without a doubt. One ends up trying to be present, and that's actually really unhelpful. So the answer is actually in meditation, and he does teach meditations. There's a meditation in the book which changed my life as well, but I misinterpreted the meditation that he was teaching. So I'd kind of created my own version of it. But I don't think, judging from the questions that he gets in his classes, that and also on the Eckhart Tolle Facebook groups, websites and forums and so on, that many people actually experience this. So it very much from the inner body meditation, it isn't transformational for them. So one can get left with this kind of pendulum experience of wanting to be present and wanting to not be caught up with the mind, and then it's possible to get stuck, because the purpose of meditation then becomes to try to be present, which doesn't work. So all of these things I've learned, and I've incorporated those in my meditations. The purpose of meditation is to become familiar with the mind, not to become present. And we can't always be present. And it's more about getting comfortable with that. So what I'm going to do is map out a little path to presence. Let's say you're new to meditation and your purpose is to be mindful, to be aware. It's actually, a lot of it is about what happens in your day, how you respond to your experience. And I've got a very simple solution to that. And what that is the practice of noting. So let's pop that up there. Interesting colour. Okay. Let's try this one then. There we go. And so what I mean by noting is using a word. For instance, when we're noting thoughts, where focusing our attention on the breath, for example, when a thought arises, we note it, and the way we do that is by saying thinking in the mind. And essentially, mind wandering is thinking. So the way to approach it is when you notice yourself, your mind wandering when you're meditating, you say in your mind thinking. When you're going through the day and you notice you've been on autopilot, do the same thing, thinking. That's it. What you're doing is you're acknowledging it, you're becoming aware of it, and then bit by bit by bit, the periods of full-on autopilot diminish, and the compelling nature of it diminishes. It becomes less intense, and the duration diminishes. This is both in meditation and in your day. So what we'll do is we'll get started with a meditation, and we'll do the noting meditation, noting thoughts, remembering that it can be done wherever you are, whatever happens. When you go offline, when you notice your mind wandering, you say in your mind thinking. That's the only thing you need to do. You don't need to try, definitely not try to be present. Doesn't work. And try that out as a strategy and see how you get on, and get back to me. Right, so let us just get started on a meditation. You just want to get yourselves comfortable. So just noticing the breath, saying in your mind, rising, falling. Belly rises, rising, belly falls, falling. What we're doing there is noting the breath. So this is the foundational noting practice. And you can begin to also note thoughts rising. So when a thought arises, what we do is we're acknowledging it by noting it. We say in our mind, thinking, thinking. So noticing the belly rising and falling. If the mind wanders, when noisy thoughts arise, just say in our mind, thinking, thinking. And then just dropping the rising and falling. So all this becomes now is a meditation of noticing the tiny movement of the belly. And when thoughts arise, just say in our mind, thinking, thinking. And then back to that tiny movement. So the thoughts are messages from the subconscious. We must acknowledge them. This is one of the things that noting achieves. If the mind is busy, it's because it has a lot to tell us. Ignoring it isn't an option. We need to acknowledge it without being drawn into it. So this is like giving attention to a puppy. Puppy jumps up. We just give her attention. And she becomes calm. Same with the mind. It needs attention, but we're not necessarily going to do whatever it wants. In the same way, puppy wants to go out into the garden and play ball now, we're not necessarily going to do it. But we're going to acknowledge her. So the noting is acknowledging the mind. So what I'm going to do now is take us on a little tour of the breath. And as I do so from time to time, you'll notice your mind being drawn away. You'll notice thoughts arising. And again, when you notice that, you notice you've drifted away from the practice. There's no need to try. There's no willpower to be applied. It's just acknowledging that that has happened. My mind has wandered. Thoughts have arisen. I have been distracted. Just say that in your mind. Thinking. So bringing the attention to the breath in the nostrils. The tongue up against the back of the top teeth. Ideally in contact with the sharp part of the bottom teeth. And notice the breath entering and leaving the nostrils. We're not modulating, regulating, altering the breath in any way. We're just witnessing it. We've chosen to witness it in the nostrils. So we're noticing the coolness of the in-breath and the warmth of the out-breath. And notice that as you breathe in, there's a point at the end of the in-breath, when the in-breath finishes, just before the out-breath begins. And at the end of the out-breath, there's a point at the end of the out-breath, just before the in-breath begins. At the end of the in-breath, it's called the top of the breath. At the end of the out-breath is the bottom of the breath. Now notice how you feel when you reach the top of the breath, and how you feel when you reach the bottom of the breath. Any thoughts that arise? Continue noticing the breath, noticing the cool alertness at the end of the end of the in-breath, the top of the breath, and the warm relaxation at the end of the out-breath, at the bottom of the breath. And soon the breath just becomes something that brings us from the top of the breath to the bottom of the breath and back again. And maintaining the same intention. Thoughts arise or your mind wanders. Just say in your mind, thinking, thinking. And then return your attention to the breath. And notice the breath hitting the back of the throat. And moving down to fill the lungs. And the chest and back. Expanding and contracting. And the chest rising and falling. And the belly rising and falling. And throughout this all, thoughts arise, or the mind wanders. All we do is say in our mind, thinking, thinking. And then return our attention to the breath. And notice movement of the belly, rising and falling. Just that movement. Again, any thoughts arise, we're just acknowledging them. Saying in the mind, thinking, thinking. Now, partly open your eyes, looking down past the tip of your nose. And allow your mind to go free. But maintain that intention. When thoughts arise, when the mind wanders, when you notice that the mind has wandered, which means it will have finished, just say in your mind, thinking, thinking. So that's your intention, is to acknowledge the mind. And what we're doing is noting. So I haven't sounded a bell because it's an opportunity for you to continue the practice. So I'm just going to say good night. And what you're going to do is maintain that if it works for you. It doesn't work for everyone all the time. But if it works for you, you maintain that as you go about whatever you do next after these meditations. If you have a time when you like to be present or you like to be mindful, set yourself an intention for that time to try this practice. We're not, there's no silver bullet. We're not stopping the thoughts. We're accepting and acknowledging them by saying thinking in our mind when we notice them arise, when we notice our minds wandered afterwards. And that to me is the softest and gentlest way into presence. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the evening, and it isn't a challenge, but maybe you'll be able to stick with the practice over the course of the evening. And if it is useful for you, do let me know how you get on. Okay, so have a wonderful week, everybody, and take care. This is a way for meditation to find its way into your life. So the boundary between meditation and experience, day-to-day experience, diminishes. Everything that you do can become a meditation.